Alrighty guys, so welcome to lesson 10. So today what we're going to be doing is learning a lot more about user inputs. So previously in the last lesson we sort of started to learn a little bit about how to get text inputs and a yes and no answer out of the user. But obviously if we want our code to be able to do a lot more for the user, then we need to be able to get user input in a lot of different ways. And really help the user out. And the Excel has a way to be able to do that. So just to show you an example of kind of where we're headed for the next lesson or two, I'm going to show you a file that I developed when I used to work at a company in a laboratory. And this particular file is designed to be able to allow at least the functionality I'm going to show you now is designed to give allow the user to be able to look up any formula and have it scaled ready to make a batch in the lab. Okay, so we click the macro the button and it starts the macro, and you'll see that we've got three different options. So option 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so that's one way to get a user input. Okay, just as an example, so we get it to create a formula, and now we're getting, and this was exactly the same code we used in the last lesson, where we just wanted to ask a question and get a yes or no answer. So we go yes. And then there's another type of user input, which I've got in this particular programming, which is basically what's called a combo box. And so I can give the user the ability to select a specific product. Okay, and click OK. And again, we're using the same sort of inputs that we learned about last lesson to scale the formula. And obviously, being able to give the user the capacity to select in a number of different ways means that we can give them really what they want. And also, one of the other things we'll quickly show you, and we will show you how to do this, is what I also programmed into this, because there's a very large list of products that can be sometimes hard to know if you don't quite know what you're looking for. So if I'll put in magenta, which is a color, into the front, I come up with 58 return values, which have all now been populated into this user input, which is going to reduce the number of products that the user has to go through. But I can even be more specific. So if I put 8101810, which is a specific product code. Oops, search by name, put it in the wrong place. 10108. Okay. There's only seven possible choices. So you can see that I can just keep doing those searches to narrow down what the user wants. Okay, so it's making the coding friendly to what the user needs, and then also being very flexible depending on what they want. Okay, so we want to teach you how to create those inputs. Okay, so we'll move across to the VBA, and we'll start to show you how to put these things together. Okay. So the first thing is that we're going to be using a slightly different area of the VBA project. So we have been doing all of our coding in modules. Okay, so you can store all of your normal code in that sort of thing, but we're going to go to a different area. So we're going to create a user form. So you'll see that in your file I've already created 4. There's probably no user forms there, and so we can create one by inserting one. And you'll notice also that we can put in a module. So if I want to put in a second module, I've got 2 places to place my code. So module 1 is where I've been doing coding, and module 2 if I want to separate my code for whatever reason, if it's getting really big and a little bit hard to deal with, you can do that. So anyway, we'll go and insert same way, we're going to insert a user form. Okay, so once you insert a user form, you'll see in this case that it's given it, you've got basically a blank form. Okay. And that blank form doesn't do anything at this point, but it gives you a basis to be able to build a form. Okay, and it's called user form 5. So you'll see that it's up in the top corner there, and it's also where my cursor is now down the bottom. So if you're ever not sure what an object, when you click on the object, any object in the form, it will give you the label that Excel has given it. Okay, so once we have that, then we want to start populating it with something that's useful. Okay, so the way we do that, there's a little sort of spanner and hammer little cross thing called toolbox. Okay, and that contains all of the user inputs. Okay, so if we say we want to put in a command button, which is just what most people use for the OK button on a form. Whoops, one step. Okay. Okay, and then we'll actually put in the code that we're going to put. Okay, so we're going to put OK. Now, once we have that, we have an object, and now we need to be able to program it to do something. Now, the way to do that for something like this is you can actually double click on it. So if I double click on it, it takes me to an area called private sub command button 1. So that basically means what is command button going to do once you click it. Okay, so if I do that, I can, now the user form was user form 5. Okay, and what I'm going to get that, what we want that OK button to do is once the user has filled in all the information it wants, we want it to click OK to say, for the user basically to say deliver the information. Okay, and the way we're going to do that is called hide. So once we have hide, then if we go back to our module 1, okay, we can put in user form 5, and I'm going to put in show. Okay. So what all we're really with the code, all we're doing is we're basically saying by running this macro, we're saying show that user form, and then once I click the OK, it says well hide it. So it's there, it's popped in and out as the user wants to use it or not. Okay. So once we can do that, then we can say, whoops, wrong one. We can start to add some information. Okay. So let's say this user form is designed to gather answer a question. So what we need to do is tell the user what that question is going to be, and we can do that by clicking on label, okay, and just creating a box, okay. And if we click on that label, then we can insert some text, okay. And you'll notice too when you look at that, if you go down to where my cursor is again, this object's within the user form object name is label 1. And let's just, we'll just put in hello. Okay, so that's one way to do it. And another way to do it, and this is just to show you how the programming works, is that you can also get VBA to actually fill in that information for you. Okay, so, and the advantage of that would be is if you construct a form where you're having to use the same form in many different ways, answering different questions, getting different inputs or whatever, you can actually reuse the form rather than having to. Okay, but for the purpose of what we're doing, just to show you how we can do that. So and before we show it, so basically before we show the form in the code, what we want to do is, and it was put a dot, the name of the object, label 1, okay, and then I'm just going to put in some text, which is going to be, this is label 1, just for the practice for what we're doing, 1, okay, and then if we run our code, push play, okay, you can see that we've populated information. So you can do it either way. Honestly, when I normally do these sort of things in the past, I've usually just created an individual user form, so I generally haven't done it this way. It doesn't really matter either way. It's just but it also shows you kind of how the syntax works for different objects, which becomes useful as we go. So let's say now we want to get some input from that user, and this time we just want to get their name, okay? Oops, not a command button. And so we're going to insert a text box in there. I didn't want to do that. Oops, I had the command button clicked. Sorry. So text box. Okay, there we go. So we've got our text box. Okay, so that's a place for the user to be able to enter their name. Okay, so we might go back to our code here and we might say, instead of label 1, what is your name? Okay, so if we test our code again, what you'll see is now we've got a box for the user enters, and yet they can quite happily enter their name. Okay. All right, so the next stage is obviously if I put in my name, Smart, and I'll click OK, the code does nothing because we haven't done anything with the information. So how do we pick up that information? Okay, so once the show user form has been created, what we have is we have this user form that's hidden but still has information. So if I click play now, you'll notice the information's still there. Okay, so I want to pick that information up. Okay, so I'm going to create a variable, because the reason I'm creating a variable is that it's not always going to be me, it's going to be someone else. So I can say dim name. Okay, so that's my variable name, and my name is going to equal user form 5, and the name of the object was a text box 1. Okay. Okay, and then if we want to show what the value of the name is to make sure it's working, I'm going to put a message box. Okay, so and that's to test that it actually works. And if we push play, what's happening is that what should happen is once I click OK, we should get a message box with my name in it. And there we go. Okay, so and so that variable could then be used to run off with programming and do any number of tasks. You get whatever the question is that you're answering. Okay, so let's do a couple more elements. So the element I'm going to do next is one called an option box. Okay, so let's say I want to put in, I want to put in a label. I'll put another label in here, and this time I'm okay. I'm going to put in what is your gender. Okay. And you might put in 3 options. Okay. You might wonder why I'm putting in 3 options. I'm being very politically correct here. Okay, and we've got the third one. Okay, that box is in the way, so I'll just move it down a little bit. And you can always straighten these things up and make them look prettier. I'll do it because okay. And so what we want to do is we want to say male. Oops. Go back to my form accidentally. Cool. I think they use the term these days of non-binary. Okay. All right. So now we've got these choices that someone can put in. Okay. All right. So if we go back to our code, now we want to do is once the user, and we'll check what the user input looks like. We can do and we don't need that anymore. Just so we know what the input looks like. Okay, so you can put in a name and then you can select one or the other. You'll notice that once I select one, the other one disappears. Okay, so what we have is we have some selections. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to do something with this. Now the reason I'm showing this one, the code is slightly more complex. So we'll put the code in now. Okay, so I'm going to put in select case because there's 3 choices in this case. True. That means if that's true, case 1 is going to be user form 5, option button. Let's go to option button. There you go. So that's case number 1. So basically, true just means if that is clicked. So it's as far as the program is concerned, it's a true or a false. Okay, option 2, and then we can do option 3. So again, I'm going to be lazy and I have to type this out. Okay, and select. Okay. All right. So there we go. Okay, so basically now we want to test the code. So obviously, if one button was selected, that might mean that you're going off to run an entire subroutine, but we'll just keep it nice and simple for the moment. Box, let's say, was it mail? That one was mail. And the other one was email, so that was option 2. Catalogs on, sorry. Okay, and then option 3 was non-binary. Non-binary it is. Okay, there we go. Okay, so nearly there. Okay, so once we have that, then what we can do is we can push play and test it out. So let's just click name. I won't bother filling in the name. Okay, it's male for the first selection. Let's test it again. Play female. Test it again. Yep. And the third one, we'll just do that. Non-binary we should get. And there we go. Okay, so that's working nicely. Okay. But the key thing with these sort of things where they go wrong is if you haven't got the name, the precise name of the object. Okay, now one other thing I will show you at this point, and then we'll get on to your task for this week, is that you'll notice that right now we're doing really simple code. We're just doing a little object. But let's say each one of these options headed off to having a really complex set of instructions. And then you would have masses and masses of code going for miles and miles and miles, which makes it somewhat unwieldy. Okay. Now there is a way to deal with this, to kind of keep your code organized and sort of have it broken up. So I'm going to do an example here. So I'm going to do, let's call this, what am I going to call this? So it's just a new sub, and I'm going to call it test. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And let's say that my instructions are much more complex than just here's a message box. Okay, but what I can do is I can create all my instructions for what's going to happen with that user form in a separate macro, and then I can call that macro. If I call it, what it means is that instruction basically goes, right, call basically means go find the next sub, the sub that's called test3 and follow its instructions, basically is what it means. Okay, so if I push play here, you'll see that there's no difference in the output, except that I've just moved the instruction into a new sub, and what will happen is I still get the information. So that's a really neat way. So if you were doing a user interface, you might say, okay, my first step of my code is I'm going to create the user interface, and then I'm going to worry about all the code of all the things that it's going to do. So it's a kind of way to organize your ideas. Okay, so your task for today, having seen all of that, is we obviously need to put these sort of skills into practice. So what we want you to do is create a contact form collecting user information. So that could have things like addresses and person's name, and you'll need to put an option bar into an option button to collect the information on the gender. Now the data that you collect needs to be displayed on a spreadsheet. So basically you might have a spreadsheet that has the name, the date of birth, whatever it is that you've decided to collect, and displays on a spreadsheet. And that shows me that the code actually works. All right. So have a crack at that. Make sure you're playing around. Try some of those extra. Some of those extra things like this. Okay, so you can try a few of these other things, but bear in mind that things like list box and combo box is something that we haven't taught you about the code. That will be next lesson. So if you want to try this square box, which is a checkbox toggle button, so it's an on and off type thing, they pretty much work the same way as what we've done. You can even insert images and all sorts of things. So you can actually have an image appear on the screen. So it's quite flexible in what you can do. Anyway, good luck. I hope to see some really creative input forms, and we'll see you all in class.